The silent observer. The research station Horizon spun lazily in orbit around the gas giant Epsilon 9, its gleaming metal arms reaching out like a starfish against the backdrop of swirling violet clouds. Inside, 14 species from across the Galactic Alliance worked together, studying everything from quantum physics to xenobiology. It was humanity's pride, a testament to interspecies cooperation, and Dominic Zephyr's personal nightmare. Zephyr, no one called him Dominic except his mother, adjusted his station uniform for the third time that morning, trying to look presentable for his shift in the linguistics lab. 6 months into his 3-year assignment, and he still felt like an imposter among the brilliant minds that populated Horizon. His specialty was xenolinguistics, the study of alien languages and communication methods, yet social interaction remained his greatest weakness. "Morning, Zeph," called out Riker, a boisterous engineer from Mars Colony with a laugh that could penetrate bulkheads. "Still trying to decode the Vesperian clicks and whistles?" Zephyr nodded, managing a tight smile. "Making progress, slowly." "Well, don't work too hard. Game night in Recreation Pod C. You should join us for once." "Maybe," Zephyr replied, knowing full well he wouldn't. The last game night had ended with him hiding in a maintenance closet after too many personalities had overwhelmed his social battery. The corridors of Horizon were always bustling, filled with humans and aliens going about, their daily routines. Zephyr had memorized the timing of shift changes, finding the brief windows when the halls were quietest for his commutes between quarters in the lab. That's when he first started noticing her, the silent one. She was Lemurian, if his xenobiology classes served him correctly. Tall and willowy with iridescent skin that shifted colors slightly with her movements like oil on water. Her eyes were large, pupilless orbs of deep violet that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 4 slender arms moved with practiced precision as she tended to the specimens in the botanical research bay. But unlike the other Lemurians on station, there were 3 total. She never spoke. Not to humans, not to other aliens, not even to her own kind. She communicated through the station's text interface when necessary, but otherwise remained completely silent. Station records identified her as Navari, botanical specialist, 3rd rotation on Horizon. She had high performance ratings and several published research papers on adaptive plant biology in varied gravity conditions. Yet no personal details, no recorded conversations, no social events attended. Zephyr found himself watching her during his lunch breaks. The botanical bay had a small observation deck where he could sit with his nutrient pack and data pad, pretending to work while actually observing her methodical movements among the exotic plants. There was something soothing about her silence, he realized. In a station constantly humming with voices, machinery, and the occasional alarm, Navari moved like a pocket of calm. Her hands never trembled, her movements never rushed, her expression never betrayed frustration or excitement. She simply was. Gradually, Zephyr developed a routine. 3 days a week, he would take his lunch in the observation deck. He noticed Navari had patterns, too. On Tuesdays, she worked with the phosphorescent fungi from Betelgeuse 4. Thursdays were dedicated to propagating the medicinal vines that supplied the medical bay. And Saturdays, she spent hours cataloging new specimens delivered by supply ships. Fascinating subject, isn't she? Zephyr nearly jumped out of his skin. Dr. Hoshi, the station's chief medical officer, had appeared beside him without warning. I wasn't. Relax, Zephyr. You're not the first to be intrigued by our silent botanist." Dr. Hoshi smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "She's been here longer than most of us, you know. 5 years without a single spoken word." "Is there something wrong with her vocal apparatus?" Zephyr asked, professional curiosity overcoming his embarrassment. "Physically?" "Not at all. Lemurian physiology is perfectly capable of producing sounds across a wide spectrum, including those comprehensible to human ears." Dr. Hoshi shrugged. "It's a choice, or perhaps a cultural practice. She's never explained, and we've learned to respect her preference." Zephyr nodded slowly. "Does she have friends?" People she communicates with? In her way, yes. Chief Engineer Varek, the Taurian with the cybernetic arm. They play chess occasionally. And she exchanges botanical samples with Dr. Zenith from xenobiology. But it's all silent. For the next few weeks, Zephyr found himself increasingly drawn to the mystery of Nivari. His professional interest as a linguist provided convenient cover for what was becoming a genuine fascination. He began learning about Lemurian culture, discovering that while they weren't typically silent, they did place immense value on meaningful communication. Words in their tradition carried weight and consequence. Then came the day everything changed. Zephyr was in the main laboratory when the station alarms blared, lights shifting to emergency red. A coolant leak in the engine room, rapidly spreading, toxic fumes through the ventilation system. The botanicals bay, with its separate atmospheric controls for the plants, became an impromptu emergency shelter. In the chaos of evacuation, Zephyr found himself helping guide personnel into the bay. The doors sealed behind the last evacuee, and temporary command stations were established. Through the confusion, Zephyr spotted Nivari moving with purpose among her plants, selecting specimens and crushing their leaves into containers. "What is she doing?" demanded Station Commander Jax. "We need that space for the medical triage area." Without thinking, Zephyr stepped forward. "Wait, I think she's helping." Sure enough, within minutes, Nivari approached the makeshift medical area, where several crew members were struggling to breathe, their lungs irritated by trace amounts of the toxic fumes. She handed her containers to Dr. Hoshi, who immediately understood. Respiratory countermeasures. Brilliant. Dr. Hoshi began administering the crushed plant matter, and within minutes the affected crew members were breathing easier. Amidst the continued emergency response, Zephyr found himself standing near Nivari as she monitored the plants providing emergency oxygen supplementation. "That was incredible," he said quietly, not expecting a response. "You saved them." She turned, those violet eyes meeting his directly for the first time. Her skin rippled with a pattern he hadn't seen before. Small, concentric circles of blue-green spreading from her shoulders down her arms. She didn't speak, but she nodded once, acknowledging him. Then, to his astonishment, she reached out and tapped the translator badge on his uniform, then pointed to her own chest where a similar device rested unused. "You want to communicate?" he asked, stunned. Another nod. Her fingers moved to the settings panel on his translator, adjusting parameters with expert precision. The device beeped, then projected a small holographic interface. Words appeared, hovering in the air between them. "The Chrysalian ferns require nitrogen adjustment to maintain oxygen production at current levels." It wasn't a thank you or an introduction, just a practical statement about the emergency at hand. But to Zephyr it felt like a door cracking open, one that had been sealed for 5 years. "I'll notify environmental control," he replied, trying to contain his excitement. "Do you need any assistance with the adjustments?" "No, but your presence is not disruptive to my work." Coming from Nivari, Zephyr suspected this might be the highest compliment she offered anyone. He stayed, following her silent instructions, helping where he could as the emergency stretched into hours. By the time the all-clear sounded, something had shifted between them. Nothing dramatic, nothing that anyone else would notice. But as crew members filed out of the botanical bay, returning to their stations and quarters, Nivari's skin briefly flashed a pattern of deep gold when she looked at Zephyr. He didn't know what it meant, but he was determined to find out. Breaking the silence. 3 days after the coolant leak emergency, Horizon Station had mostly returned to normal operations. Repair crews worked round the clock to replace damaged systems, but the regular rhythm of research and daily life resumed. For most of the crew, the incident was already becoming an anecdote, another story to share during off-duty hours. For Zephyr, however, everything had changed. His brief interaction with Nivari had awakened something in him, not just curiosity about her silence, but a deeper recognition. In her methodical movements and careful communication, he saw a kindred spirit, someone who, like him, found the constant social demands of station life overwhelming, but had found a different way to cope. He approached the botanical bay with unusual confidence that morning, carrying a small package. Nivari was at her usual station, examining a new specimen under a molecular scanner. Her iridescent skin today had a subtle undertone of lavender, matching the exotic flowers she tended. She noticed him immediately, her movements pausing for just a moment before resuming their precise rhythm. "Good morning," Zephyr said, stopping, at a respectful distance. "I brought something you might find useful." He placed the package on a nearby workbench, unwrapping it carefully. Inside was a modified translator device, more sophisticated than the standard-issue badges worn by station personnel. "I've been working on this in my spare time," he explained. "It's a xenolinguistic interface specifically calibrated to Lemurian bioelectric patterns. It can translate thoughts into text without requiring vocalization, if that's something you'd prefer." Nivari approached slowly, examining the device with evident interest. Her fingers hovered over it, not quite touching. Then she looked up at Zephyr, her expression unreadable. He quickly added, "You don't have to use it, of course. I just thought, during the emergency, when you adjusted my translator, it seemed like maybe the standard communication methods here don't suit your preferences." Nivari picked up the device, turning it over in her hands. After a moment of consideration, she attached it to her wrist. The interface illuminated, connecting with her bioelectric field. Words appeared on the small display. "Why have you created this for me?" The directness of the question caught Zephyr off guard. I guess because I understand what it's like not fitting into expected communication patterns. As a xenolinguist, I'm supposed to be good with communication, but, ironically, I find most social interaction exhausting." Nivari studied him, then typed a response. "You observe me during your meal periods, 27 times over the past 6 weeks." Heat rushed to Zephyr's face. "You noticed that? I'm sorry if it made you uncomfortable. I just found your work fascinating and, well, your silence was peaceful." The corners of Nivari's eyes crinkled slightly, the first hint of expression he'd seen on her face. It was not unwelcome. Few here understand the value of observation without interference. For the next hour, they worked side by side in the botanical bay, Zephyr helping with basic tasks while Nivari conducted her research. She used the new device sparingly, communicating only when necessary, but each message felt significant. He learned that she came from a remote Lemurian colony, where communal living required careful balance of social energy. Their species evolved as empathic receivers, constantly absorbing the emotions and thoughts of those around them. Most Lemurians developed filtering mechanisms during adolescence, but Nivari's filters had never fully formed. "Every voice becomes my voice. Every emotion becomes mine to carry," she explained. "Silence became my protection." "So you can hear everyone all the time?" Zephyr asked, horrified at the thought. "Not precisely, but enough that constant exposure becomes overwhelming. Here among 14 species, each with their own emotional patterns and thought structures, it is too much." "Then, why stay? Why put yourself through this?" Nivari's skin rippled with a pattern he now recognized as contemplative, concentric circles of blue-green. The plants. They communicate differently. Their patterns are simple, pure. They do not demand or expect. They simply exist and grow. With them, I find peace. As their unusual partnership developed over the following weeks, Zephyr found himself sharing more of his own struggles. His difficulty reading social cues, his exhaustion after group interactions, his preference for structured communication over spontaneous conversation. Nivari, in turn, began using the translator more frequently with him. Never for trivial matters, she maintained her characteristic economy of expression, but their exchanges grew deeper, more meaningful. One evening, as they worked late cataloging specimens from a recent expedition, Zephyr noticed something extraordinary. Nivari was humming. Not vocally, but her skin was vibrating in a pattern that created a soft, almost imperceptible melody. "That's beautiful," he said without thinking. The way your skin creates music. She froze, the vibrations ceasing immediately. Her eyes widened, and for a moment Zephyr feared he had overstepped. Then, to his astonishment, her skin began to glow, a radiant golden light emanating from within, turning her iridescent surface into something transcendent. Patterns of light danced across her form, complex and mesmerizing. "I've never seen anything like that," Zephyr whispered, awestruck. Nivari's fingers moved quickly over the translator. "No one has ever called my chromatic resonance beautiful before." "Why not?" "It's the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen." "Ondao. My world, it is considered a vulnerability, an unwanted expression of emotion that reveals too much. Children learn to suppress it before adulthood." "But it's part of who you are," Zephyr said. "A language all your own." She studied him for a long moment, then removed the translator from her wrist and set it aside. Zephyr watched, confused, as she stepped closer to him. And then she spoke. "In 5 years, 3 months, and 14 days, aboard this station," she said, her voice soft but clear with a musical quality that reminded him of wind chimes. "No one has ever truly seen me until now." Zephyr couldn't hide his shock. "You can speak." "I always could," Nivari said, each word deliberate and precious. "But words are sacred to my people. We believe they should only be shared with those who truly see us, not just our physical form, but our essential nature." "And you think I see you?" Zephyr asked, humbled by the revelation. "You noticed my silence was not emptiness but fullness," she replied. "You created a way for me to communicate on my terms, and you found beauty in what I was taught to hide." In the days that followed, Nivari spoke only occasionally, and only to Zephyr. She explained that vocal communication remained difficult for her. Each word formed a deeper connection, allowing others' emotions to flow more freely into her consciousness. But she no longer felt the need to maintain complete silence. Word spread quickly throughout the station. The silent botanist had spoken. Curious crew members found reasons to visit the botanical bay, hoping to hear the legendary voice for themselves. They left disappointed, as Nivari maintained her silence in group settings. Commander Jack summoned both Zephyr and Nivari to her office, concerned about the change in dynamic. "I need to understand what's happening here," she said bluntly. 5 years of established behavior suddenly changing could impact station operations. Before Zephyr could respond, Nivari spoke, surprising them both. "Nothing has changed fundamentally, Commander," she said softly. "I have simply found someone who listens well enough that speaking becomes worthwhile." The commander stared, then nodded slowly. "Very well. Carry on." As they left the office, Zephyr noticed Nivari's skin shimmering, with gold patterns again. "You're glowing," he pointed out. "It happens when I feel truly seen," she explained. "When someone recognizes value in my difference rather than inconvenience." "I'm honored," Zephyr said sincerely. "But I'm curious. Will you ever tell me why you chose to speak to me that first time? What made you decide I was worthy of your words?" Nivari's skin rippled with amusement, a pattern of dancing spirals that Zephyr had come to recognize as her version of laughter. "Because you called me beautiful," she said simply. "Not my appearance, not my work, but the very thing I had been taught to suppress. You saw beauty where I had been taught to see shame." As they walked back toward the botanical bay, Zephyr realized something profound had changed, not just for Nivari, but for himself as well. In trying to understand her silence, he had found his own voice. The linguist who struggled with communication had somehow bridged the gap to someone whose entire existence was defined by communicative barriers. Together, they had created something rare on Horizon Station, a space where silence and words held equal value, where being seen mattered more than being heard. "Do you think you'll ever speak to the others?" Zephyr asked as they reached the botanical bay. Nivari considered the question, her skin shifting through contemplative patterns before settling into a calm blue. "Perhaps," she said finally. "But they would need to learn what you already know. That There are many languages beyond words, and sometimes the most important things are expressed in silence. As if to demonstrate, she reached out and gently squeezed his hand, her skin briefly illuminating with golden light where they touched. No. Translator, no words, yet Zephyr understood perfectly. Sometimes the most beautiful conversations happen without a sound.